So after being in this field for 10 years now, when I look back across my coaching clients, I notice that there are some themes that they have in common. And today I want to share the 5 big shifts with you that these clients were trying to make from this to that. And my hope in sharing this is that you might feel a little bit less alone if you're also struggling with some of these same themes and maybe ready to break through those. And at the end of this video, I also want to share with you some ways to think about making these kinds of breakthroughs so that they happen more quickly and that they're also more enduring. Now, first, foundationally, what these clients had in common was that they were all committed, deeply committed to becoming better versions of themselves. Now, they all had different life circumstances. Some of them really wanted to get a promotion, and so they wanted to make some improvements to be able to show that. Some of them had just gotten a promotion and were now drowning and treading water because their old patterns were kind of dragging them down. Some of them wanted more income. Some of them wanted more financial stability. Some of them wanted better relationships. But either way, what they had in common at that core was that they were taking ownership of this moment and saying, okay, I need to make a pivot and I need to make an upgrade in how I show up in the world. And so maybe we can paraphrase Gandhi here and say they realized that they really needed to be the change and that it's time to stop blaming the environment or stop waiting for something else to change. They took matters into their own hands. So let's take a look at these 5 themes. And as you're listening, invite you to feel into if some of these might resonate with you as well. So theme number 1, the most common theme that's come up with my leaders time and time again over the years, is that they're too passive. What I mean by that is that they're waiting. They're waiting for direction. They're a little bit indecisive. They tend to waffle. They want more information. They want more consensus maybe. And so they're letting others take the initiative. And if you want to have more of those better outcomes in your life, it's more likely to happen if you take the helm rather than waiting and hoping. Hope is not a strategy. So that's number 1 theme, being too passive. Number 2 is being too pleasing. And what this looks like is saying yes too often and too easily and too quickly to others and going in the direction that others want to go because we don't want to upset anyone and we don't want to ruin our reputation and we don't want to be called a certain name or a certain thing. So we just go along, it's okay, we don't want to ruffle any feathers, and we'll go where the other people want to go. Also, not a very leader-like way of showing up, but a deeply ingrained one, and it kind of works if you play your cards right. That was number 2. Number 3 is to be too driven. If this is one of your patterns, you probably have a lot of energy. You have a lot of drive. You like to get things done. You like to get things done personally, and you bring that intensity to work as well. Trouble is, if you do that for year after year after year and decade after decade, it starts to get tiring. And my clients find themselves a little bit worn out, that they've been driving too hard and maybe driving their people too hard, and they're not sure what to do because they still want to achieve those results and they have this internal intensity, but it just comes out as too much drive. I want to do too many things. My identity is too attached to the quantity of the results that I generate. So that's the 3rd big theme that came out. Now, in slightly lesser numbers, I want to share the last 2 themes with you. This 4th one is that people are a little too focused on being or appearing perfect. This one is tricky, obviously, because it's good to have high standards, and people do expect high standards of you, and your image does matter. But those who are struggling with a little too much perfection, A, are probably beating themselves up because of their inner critic constantly hounding them, or they are too focused on things that don't ultimately matter. Are there any typos in the presentation? Or did I choose the right words for that email I need to send that? Or are the margins on this document exactly perfect? Because people notice those kinds of things. Yeah, look, they do, and they also don't. There are probably higher value, more strategic things that these clients could have been working on. And at some level, they knew that. They just couldn't quite tame their inner critic or demon that made them keep focusing and get it right. Okay, and the last thing is clients who are a little too distant. They're reserved and they play it cool and they are very much up in their heads. And it's a little bit hard to make an emotional connection with people who are distant like this. So there are some side effects to showing up in this way. But it is a sort of a protective stance. We have a bit of a shell up, and it diminishes psychological safety as well as relationships and relationship qualities. So whatever the theme is, and that for these clients or for you, what I found that they all had in common was that this was not a surprise to them. They knew that they had this issue. This had always been their issue. They had had this through their whole lives. They figured as teenagers in high school, they had this issue. In college, they had this issue. In their early jobs, they had this issue. And what's starting to happen for these clients is, look, there are benefits to having high standards. Like I said, perfection is okay. It's good. You get high standards. But there are also side effects to it. And over time, if you keep employing the same strategy again and again and again, let's say you're trying to rise up through the ranks, you get to a point where it's not working so well anymore. And in fact, it gets in your way. And so now the costs are outweighing some of the benefits of showing up in this way, whether it's being more reserved and cool and aloof, or being more perfectionist or driven or pleasing. It doesn't matter. There are side effects to all of those different behaviors and patterns and ways of being. And so, depending on if you want to get those better results in your life and it's being called for around you or you're getting the feedback, you need to show up differently. And how do you do that? Well, look, I love books, but you might get it out of a book if you're lucky. If you try to type into ChatGPT, how do I be less pleasing? How do I be less distant? You'll get some good ideas, but then implementing those, that will be the trick. That'll be the challenge. And if you have a system that has 20, 30, 40 years of momentum of doing things a certain way, there's a whole worldview and a way that you see the world. And then there are just habits and biology that go into it. That's hard to change. Old habits die hard. The good news is that there is a way to change that. And it's not through willpower, and it's not through brute force, and it's not through adding another degree or another skill or tool. It's through understanding how you work, understanding how humans work. And that's something that we want to share with you, is an understanding of that and an ability to step back and see that. It'll be a universal understanding, but you'll be able to apply it personally to how you tick and whatever your theme might have been. Maybe it wasn't even on the slide there. So we're going to talk about this method and approach. I keep saying we because it's my colleague Dan and I. We've personally helped dozens and dozens of people drop the shackles and break from these kinds of things and transform into a new way of being in the world, a better way of being that's easier and has less of those side effects. So, as Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. So that's what we're doing here, is we're taking this unconscious pattern that has been running you for most of your life, and we're helping make it conscious so you can see where the invisible threads are now. And we're going to give you the keys to be able to rewrite this pattern and to be able to make that big pivot and shift in your life. So sign up for the webinar on October 11th, and you'll learn more about this approach and everything you need to know to decide whether or not you're ready for the big 2-day shift on November 3rd and 4th. So this is your invitation. You trust us. Your family will be glad you did this. Your team will be glad you did this. And most importantly, this is for you, a gift that you're going to give to yourself. We'll see you there.